Before we get started with the meeting, I'll ask you all to stand and we'll do your oath of office. And if the alternate directors would come up from the audience, we'll swear you all in at the same time. Okay, if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors of April 13th, 2016 to order. We're going to begin with roll call. Director Bruins? Present. Director Harpootlian? Here. Director Rennie?
Here.
Director Craig, I note is absent. Director Tate? Director McAllister?
Here.
Director Simidian? Here. Director Miller? Here. Director Griffith?
Here.
Director Gibbons?
Here.
Director Sinks?
Here.
And Director Harney?
Present.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and proceed with the approval of the interim board chair.
Good evening, Melody Tovar. So we, as proposed in the staff report, have identified an interim chair as a recommended nomination for you. That is John McAllister. Director McAllister is seated in what we think would be the chair seat this evening. And so he has accepted offline the nomination. I'll just ask him to confirm that now. That you accept the nomination?
Yes, I would be honored to serve as chair.
Thank you,
Temporary
sir.
chair.
And at this point, we can open it to the board for a formal motion. We do need a formal vote to appoint the interim chair.
I would move John McAllister as chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, we'll proceed with a roll call vote. Director Bruins?
Aye.
Director Harpootlian?
Yes.
Director Rennie?
Aye.
Director Craig? I'm sorry. Director Tate? Director McAllister?
Yes.
Director Simidian? Director Miller? Director Griffith?
Aye.
Director Gibbons?
Aye.
Director Sinks?
Aye.
Director Harney?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
So, well, thank you, everyone, for that support. It was amazing how I got in this position, so we won't question it. Should we go to public comment right off?
That would be your discretion. We have added it to the back of the agenda, not the front in this case.
Okay, you put it at the end. And just in case the person would like to leave early, I'll take public comments. If anybody has any other requests to speak, fill out a card, give it to our Melody down there, and we will come up to the podium over here, or to the podium. And Jeff Byron, would you like to speak? And I believe it's we have 3 minutes, if that is working.
It is. Thanks.
Okay.
Gentlemen, I will be much briefer than 3 minutes. My name is Jeff Byron, resident of Los Altos. I would like to commend all of you, present and not present, for what you've done this evening. As a former California Energy Commissioner, I can tell you, and I'm sure that Senator Simitian, Supervisor Simitian can tell you, that pushing renewable portfolio standards is a very difficult thing to do. Energy efficiency standards, very difficult thing to do. Cap and trade and reducing greenhouse gases. And this evening you've done that all in one fell swoop. I commend you. And I also would like to commend an organization, a nonprofit out of Sonoma County you may or may not heard of, that about 2.5 years ago was early in bringing community choice energy in a number of meetings here, and that is the Center for Climate for Protection. I think some of their folks, at least one I saw here today. Ann Hancock, the director, could not be here. I wanted to commend her as well because her organization saw this as the greatest way to reduce GHG on a local basis, greenhouse gases, and they were very instrumental in this. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do a little housekeeping right now. If you want to speak, I notice Board Member Sinks, you have your red light on, so if you would, that would be one indication for me to see that if you want to speak, you just, and I will see the red lines, and that will help. As we go over the agenda today, I'd like to remind our board members of the importance of what we're doing today and what's happening later tonight. And so with that in mind, everybody hopefully had an opportunity to have the webinar to get up to speed, and everybody had an opportunity to look at their packet. And in our city, a lot of that stuff would be on the consent calendar. So if you need to ask any technical questions, hopefully that maybe you can take those offline because a lot of the information here is just administrative to get the ball rolling. So if everybody's in an agreement, we will start. I do not want to make anybody feel that they can't speak freely, but we have a lot to do, and it's an honor to be doing it. So we will go. We've already finished item 3. We just had a, Mr. Burton just sat down. Would you like to take him outside and swear him in? Or take it aside, or would you like to swear him in now, or wait?
I can go ahead and
Good,
swear
right
you
now.
in now. Okay, if you'll go ahead and stand and raise your right hand. Do you, Burton Craig, solemnly swear or affirm, I state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm
Do solemnly swear and affirm
that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely and
without
any mental reservation
or purpose of
or
evasion,
purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
that I will well and truly faithfully discharge the duties I am about to endeavor.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome our new member. Okay, we will go on to item number 3. Do we have a staff report?
We do. I'm Greg Stepanisic, board, and we have before you tonight one of the basic organizational items for you to take care of at your first meeting, which is the adoption of the Conflict of Interest Code required by state law. And the code before you is very simple. It requires a Form 700 to be filed by you initially within 3 days of assuming office, and that will be all the board members, the alternates. When there is a chief executive officer, they will also file the form, and then general counsel will also file a form that will reflect any financial interest that could affect your decision-making. Once the code is adopted by you under state law, the County Board of Supervisors also has to review it and approve it, and at that point it becomes final. So if you have any questions, be happy to answer them. Otherwise, at this point, it'd be appropriate to entertain a motion to approve and adopt the Conflict of Interest Code.
Okay,
Move approval with a quick request.
Second.
okay. Do board secretary need to identify those? You need help, you know who did it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you tell me the seconder, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
do we have any public that would like to make a comment on this? Okay, bring it back. We have a,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
one quick request of our legal counselor, Mr. Stepanisic. There has been some confusion in regional agencies and bodies before with respect to members of the Board of Supervisors who have filed Form 700s for the county-wide jurisdiction. I'd simply like to ask, and I'm doing this in an open and public meeting for a reason, I'd simply like to ask that you coordinate with our county council with respect to the filing of a Form 700 in my case, which is a little different than those who come from other individual jurisdictions inside the county. That's
Yes,
all.
I will do that. There is, one thing is filing the initial statement, then you'll be filing annual statements, and those can be combined statements actually for all of you in the future, but there will also be this first initial assuming office statement.
Thank you very much.
Discussion, I see Board Member Gibbons.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to confirm, can we use the portal for the county to file the 700 forms like we do other multiple agency forms, or do we
I'll
have to do
have to double check on that, and we'll inform you as to if it could be done that way.
these? Okay, thank you.
Do I see any other discussion? Okay, call for the question.
Director Bruins? Director Harpootlian?
Yes.
Director Rennie?
Aye.
Director Craig? Director Tate? Director McAllister?
Yes.
Director Simidian?
Aye.
Director Miller?
Aye.
Director Griffith?
Aye.
Director Gibbons?
Aye.
Director Sinks?
Aye.
Director Harney?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Oh, thank you.
Point of order, if it may please the chair.
I'm sorry?
I'm asking for a point of order, John.
Okay.
We could do roll call votes on everything, but we might be much more efficient if we just call a question as a single item. And if somebody wants to dissent, we can get the names then. I don't know if that's possible under our laws, but certainly would make it more efficient.
Oh, I'm all for efficiency, but I was just wondering if it's our first meeting that we want to make sure certain things are open to the public and we show transparency. But I could leave it up to my collective group. If they want to move it that way, or you would like to move the efficient way, or discussion. Okay?
Yeah, I would support doing it the efficient way, and clearly for voting no to state the name for the records.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go to, also, do we have staff, will we have staff reports on every single one of these?
Yes, you will.
Okay. Okay. Number 5.
Number 4, the next item would be
Okay.
another housekeeping item that's required by the Brown Act, and that is establishing the time, date, and place of your regular meetings. So we have before you a resolution that does establish your meeting dates as the second Wednesday of each month, and also to be held at this time at the county board room here. The one thing we have left open here is the time of the meeting, so you could decide actually what time you want to start your meetings, and so we left that open for discussion. And Melody, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add on the time of the meetings.
I'll just draw your attention to the staff report where we identified available times based on the county staff's review of this room's availability. And so it looks like in general you could start as early as 1:30, but a later time such as 5:30 would ensure that it is available throughout the rest of the year.
Okay. Any public would like to speak on this? Bring it back to the board for a motion?
I would respectfully ask if we might consider other facilities that are maybe perhaps more central to many of us.
Yeah, but if you look at, we have 12 members, and all of everybody would like a mic, and I don't know of any other area that supports 12.
I don't know either. I'm just asking the question because I know getting down here in the late afternoon is can be
Oh, so you're
challenging.
looking at the time or facilities?
Facility specifically. I'm open as to the time.
I think the VTA also meets here because of the size of their board, so that just facilitates a large board, but the times could be considered. Okay.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So are these meetings recorded?
Yes.
Which I think is another reason, I think having it here where you have the facilities for this mini mics and such, I think we need to have it here.
Board Member Gibbons?
Yes, so am I correct that we need to discuss the time?
Yes, that is
of the
correct.
meeting? So can we do, are we assuming our meetings will take 2 hours, generally speaking?
That would be a good goal.
Okay.
Some of them could go longer, but I think the general meetings should, in general, they should be within 2 hours.
So I'm understanding that we could start, according to this table in our notes, at 5:30 in May. We have no choice but to do it at 5:30 in May.
That's true only for May. So the other months have more flexibility as to start time.
Right. So do we want to take a decision on the rest of the time, or perhaps staff can send out a Google meeting notice and we could pick the most preferred time?
Well, we are required to actually establish the time of the meeting and the resolution, so that's why it would be good to pick a time that's generally going to work. Again, if we need to adjourn a meeting on a special occasion, we can do that, but it would be good to have a common date and time.
Okay, so however the chair wants to handle that sequence of meetings and times.
Well, they have recommended the 1:30, so that would,
Chair, just for clarification, it's not a staff recommendation, so we just wanted to give you a parameter within which you could make your decision based on your own interest and availability.
Okay, I'll make a proposal.
That's not a question.
So
I still have
I'm assuming that we have members who may have day jobs as well. So maybe can we, anybody not have a day job? I mean, who has a day job? Okay, then, you know what, so then I'm going to propose, I'll just put a stab out there, I'll do 7 p.m. That gives people enough time to have a meal before they come to this, and then that allows us to run as late as necessary.
I like that.
okay. I will start here with,
John, 2 questions.
go ahead, Howard.
Sure. One is the July. I see if you look at the list, there's a bunch of stuff for us to do in July, but a lot of public agencies are intentionally dark in July. So I just didn't know what people's thoughts were on that. And the second question was 7:30 on
December?
December seemed kind of late, but that was just an observation.
Okay. Board Member Smidian, your light's on? Okay, so I hear we had 7 o'clock was proposed. Board Member Griffin?
Yes, I'll point out that it isn't uncommon, particularly for the December meeting, for agencies to hold it on a different day due to various conflicts. We could always schedule it on a different day since 7:30, nothing before 7:30 is available. If push comes to shove, and obviously we would probably need to do the same thing for the July meeting anyway, assuming we have one.
I'm just curious, how many cities are dark for city councils in July? Mountain View is. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, we cross over July to August. It's late
Okay.
July, early
And
August.
in our case, it's off in August.
Okay. But were you anticipating being dark, or is it just not available, but
It's
also
the
that
space that's not available. As we'll show with your work plan here, we did envision a July meeting, and the board member is right that it is a heavy load for what we have loaded in there for July. We can certainly reevaluate and bring it back to the board based on your direction and wishes.
Okay. Okay, so I see that you had another question, sir?
No, I will just point out that the Sunnyvale staff organizing this is probably influenced by the fact that Sunnyvale works all 12 months of the year, which may be why this is happening.
We all work 24/7, 365, so we'll just clarify that one. Okay, so did I see a consensus at around 7 o'clock?
So should I make a motion? Do we
Yes,
need a
that's
motion?
appropriate. It would be a
That'd be
motion
fine.
to insert the time and adopt the resolution.
I move that our regular meetings date is the second Wednesday of the month and time at 7 p.m.
I'll second.
Second, okay. Any discussion? Okay.
And this motion will be to adopt the resolution as
Okay.
presented to you with the time insert of 7 p.m.
Board Secretary, understand the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need, okay. Motion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, passes
Unanimously, I think.
Thank you.
unanimously. Okay. Item number 5. Okay, staff report?
Good evening, Chair and Board. Melody Tovar on behalf of Authority staff. So you have a number of items for action this evening. Item 5 is a presentation that attempts to stitch those items together and give you a foundation for why we're bringing those particular items forward. This evening, we're going to go over a program plan overview, launching you from where we've been with our earlier decision-making into where we're going. We have created a Board of Directors work plan, which we've provided for you at the desk today. There are additional copies in the back of the room. It is small print, and so presenting it on the slide will not be sufficient. And we have with us the staff from PEA, so the President and Vice President, Kirby DeSalle and John DeLessie, will be joining us to give us a more technical look at some of the key milestones coming up. Aaron Cook with Cupertino will be presenting on the communications plan, giving you a brief view into how we envision engaging our community going forward. And then we'll wrap with a staffing and resource plan as we transition the JPA to a point where it's ready to hire its own staff. So for program planning, we start you with where we left you. And so we've been looking at this same phased work plan and milestones throughout our project, and we are now here tonight in phase 2. And so we have launched the JPA with your actions here this evening, and want to draw your attention to a couple of key milestones in phase 2. We are developing our Community Choice Energy program. And the key milestones in doing so are, in addition to convening you, developing a formal implementation plan for how our program will go forward. That goes to the California Public Utilities Commission for formal approval. We also have to buy energy, and so our energy services procurement step is another big milestone step for us going forward. In addition, there are other items here shown as well. Phase 3 will be the Community Choice Energy Program launch, where we're actively preparing to serve customers once we've already identified our energy services provider and done the other requisite steps in Phase 2. And we are aiming for a launch beginning in what we've said here is winter 2017. More specifically, we're looking at April 17 for launch. So this is our current proposed timeline, showing that we're launching here today in April. That key milestone of an implementation plan going out the door approved by you to the CPUC in July. Finishing our energy procurement in November. You can imagine that takes a couple of months to actually accomplish. And at the same time, ramping up our authority operations so that we are ready to actually serve customers. Serving customers begins with actually providing notices of what the program is and what their options are. It's a formal process that will begin in January and conclude in February, according to our schedule. That needs to be founded on rates that you have set, and so we'll do rate setting also in January, all geared toward a program service commencement of April 2017 for our first phase of customers. So the work plan that you have before you this evening, and again, there's copies in the back of the room for those who are interested, does have those key milestones across the top. And then what we've attempted to do is to populate your various agenda board meetings with requisite items that need to be accomplished by the board in order to establish and continue direction for the staff. And a number of those are here this evening. So our key categories include just your administrative policies, much like you do in your oath of office today. Staffing, which will also begin today by talking about your interim CEO. Various contracts. You can imagine that, especially before you have staff, there will be a lot of contract work to support the authority. And then various programmatic and strategic direction items that are important to the board. Some of them are presentation, some of them are action. All of them are geared toward establishing direction for the program and the authority. We've laid out the work plan from April 2016 to April 2017, which is when we envision commencing our first service. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John and Kirby to talk about our key implementation steps.
Great. Good evening. I'm Kirby Dussel with Pacific Energy Advisors. Congratulations to all of you. This is a really big deal. John and I have been fortunate enough to work with all of California's operating community choice programs and have been very eager to see these very meetings come to pass. So congratulations to all of you. This is a really big deal. Just want to spend a little bit of time this evening talking about a couple of key items that ought to be on your radar for the not too distant future here. Both are really key documents that are going to be fundamental to launching this organization. The first of which is the Community Choice Aggregation Implementation Plan. The second will be the Energy Services Request for Proposal, which of course is necessary to secure the requisite power supplies that your customers are going to need in order to effect successful launch of this organization. So regarding the implementation plan, you can see here just a basic list of what this document is and what it is not. First and foremost, it's a statutory requirement. Any organization that intends to launch a community choice aggregation program within the state of California must complete an implementation plan and submit that plan to the California Public Utilities Commission for certification. Within that plan, there are a number of details that need to be described regarding the program, including the process for forming the organization, staffing it, setting rates, contracting processes, and the like, as well as the quote-unquote consequences, and that's the language identified in the Public Utilities Code, not my own, but the consequences of aggregation as well. That document must be adopted at a public meeting by this particular board, and ultimately, like I previously mentioned, submitted to the California Public Utilities Commission, which has a 90-day period in order to certify that that plan is attentive to each of the statutory requirements identified in the Public Utilities Code. I think there can be a bit of confusion about what the implementation plan really is not. And it's not intended to be a detailed business plan for all of your intended complementary energy programs like net energy metering or energy efficiency. This is really kind of hitting the marks that are laid out in statute so that this program can move forward. It's also not a detailed inventory of all the different rate options that you may ultimately decide to offer to your customers. The implementation plan will describe the rate-setting process generally, but it's not necessary within that document to describe how it is that you intend to develop rates for each one of your different customer classifications that may be served by the program. And it's also not intended to describe all of the different projects that may be developed or financed or pursued via contracting mechanisms by this particular organization. So those items tend to just kind of bog down the Commission's review, and they're not statutorily required, so we don't recommend including them. I think one of the good news items is that there are many great kind of template examples, if you will, that have been submitted for this document. Those have been, I think, they're increasing in familiarity at the Commission, and with regard to the 90-day review period, I think use of those template documents has really served to expedite that process, which may also be in your interest as well. Next slide. Kind of touched on a couple of these items already, but this is more of a longer list of the different requirements that need to be attended to. Within the implementation plan, you can see here elements related to the organization of this particular agency, how it will be staffed, how it will be governed, what sort of areas of expertise are needed to carry out the functions that are anticipated for this particular organization. How will the organization be financed? Will bank financing be used? Will loans be given? How will the necessary capital needs of this organization be assembled? Rate setting, of course, that's a very key item in the implementation plan. How will rates be set? What sort of public review periods, if any, will be contemplated, and the like. Other items related to entering into and terminating agreements, a description of, say, the request for proposal process for selecting vendors that may be serving as your initial energy service providers. How will those things be carried out? And then, of course, to the extent you have this information available, a description of those third parties that will be working with the program to provide those initial energy needs and related services. All right, so a couple of other key elements here, and you can see there are placeholders because at this point, we really haven't fully discussed these items, but for purposes of filling out the implementation plan, it's very common to identify both the default service offering that will be made available to all your customers. At this point in time, we're not sure exactly what that is, so that's going to be taken up by your board and ultimately decided upon before that information is entered in the implementation plan. For those of you that are familiar with the technical study, there were 3 different options, 3 different supply portfolios, if you will, that were analyzed as part of that study. You're not bound by any of the parameters that were used in framing those different supply portfolios, and so we'll take that item up a little bit more later to figure out how those X's and Y's, if you will be filled in within the implementation plan for purposes of letting your customers and the Public Utilities Commission know the resource mix that your customers will receive on day one. We'll also talk about filling in information related to a voluntary 100% renewable energy option that you may make available to your customers. And then, of course, there will be some general high-level discussion about some of the complementary energy programs, customer programs that may be pursued by this organization as well. You can see some examples here, as well as the different timelines that are contemplated for developing the details around those programs. All right, and then one of the other very key items that's articulated in the implementation plan is the phase-in schedule for enrolling your customers over time. For purposes of the technical study, we assumed a 3-phase implementation approach that would be carried out over a 25-month period. So 1/3 of the customers would be enrolled in month 1, Another third would be enrolled essentially a year later, and then the remaining third would be enrolled a year after that. It's really up to you to decide how that's carried out, which customers will be included in each phase, and how that will be carried out over time. So that's another item we'll be coming back to you with to talk about a bit more. So here's the schedule of kind of upcoming steps related to the implementation plan. A draft will be in the works and will come back to your board in June. At that particular point in time, we'll also be asking you to approve those initial kind of supply goals that will define the different product offerings that will be made to your customers, as well as that phasing plan that I talked about before. A month later, there'll be some discussion again related to more detailed staffing of the organization. So in June, that will be more of a kind of a general description. There'll be increased definition in July. And that information will be folded into the implementation plan that will be submitted shortly thereafter, initiating that 90-day review period, which would end in October of 2016, and essentially marked by the receipt of a letter from the Public Utilities Commission indicating that your implementation plan satisfactorily met the statutory requirements laid out in the Public Utilities Code. Okay, so the second kind of key item to put on your radar here is the Energy Services request for proposal. As you can imagine, it's very important to put this sort of contract or contracts in place before you're able to effectively serve your customers. This particular process will serve to identify not only the renewable and carbon-free content energy products that your customers will need, but also some of the conventional power sources that they will need as well to kind of shape and firm power based on the different times of day and times of use that your customers represent. We'll also spec out, of course, the quantities of power, and so basically when the power will be used by your customers. There's been a lot of work completed to date in terms of understanding historical data related to the manner in which your customers may use electric power, and then, of course, projecting that out into the future. And those numbers will be folded in to this particular request for proposal to inform suppliers about how it is that they ought to structure these particular offers and how it is that they ought to quantify the different energy requirements that are being requested. There's also an element within the Energy Services RFP related to resource adequacy capacity, which is nothing more than reserve capacity, essentially ensuring the reliable operation of California's bulk electric system. All entities like yourself, as well as the investor-owned utilities and municipal utilities throughout the state, must be attentive to these reserve capacity requirements, demonstrating that they have 115% of their peak demands fulfilled through contractual commitments with generators throughout the system. So that's just a way to make sure that everybody is kind of doing their part to promote reliable service throughout the state. And then in terms of the procurement exercise itself, there'll be various requirements outlined in the request for proposals to help you identify qualified suppliers of these products and services. At the end of the day, you may wind up with more than one. It's not necessary that you deal with a single vendor on this particular concern. And then I think it's also noteworthy that this particular request for proposal really won't be intended to help spec out all of the details related to the complementary energy programs that you may ultimately offer down the road. So items like energy efficiency, demand response, and the like. Those are things that will be folded in through an integrated planning effort over time. And as I pointed out a little earlier in the implementation plan discussion, those kind of have a place in the schedule here, if you will, and will be dealt with and elaborated upon as we move forward. And of course, additional solicitations will ultimately be necessary to meet the electric energy requirements of your future customer phases. And here's the schedule related to the Energy Services RFP. You can see kind of key details here. Ultimately, working towards the release of that Energy Services RFP in June, In July, it's contemplated that there would be an ad hoc committee of your board formed for purposes of evaluating prospective energy service providers and kind of facilitating that contracting process. And then looking forward a bit further into November, that's when the anticipated contract would go into place with your initial service provider or providers. So be happy to answer any questions on that if you have them.
Would you like to question now? Mr. Hart?
Well, I just have one that concerns me. Getting this up and running quickly is a keen interest probably of everyone here. You know, I am wondering the CPUC process, 90 days. Is that 90 days assuming they have no issues, there's no deficiencies found, or is that 90 days including some going back and forth?
Yeah, that's inclusive of the back and forth. And I think it's noteworthy that that 90-day period hasn't been used in full to date. That review has typically occurred in a much tighter time frame than that.
So we're assuming we'll be pretty close because we're using templates from other proven agencies, and it'll have some details specific to us, and we're probably going to be 90% right on the first go. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I think it's probably also worth pointing out that the implementation plan isn't about being right or wrong. So there's no test down the road as to whether or not you were, accurate in meeting every mark that's established in that plan. There can be deviations. I think it's really, your best guess, your closest approximation as to what you intend to do. But yeah, there's no kind of close checking by the Public Utilities Commission in terms of whether or not that implementation plan.
I just don't want to get hung up with some weird deficiency that they pull out of a hat.
No, and I think that, you mentioned the use of the template, and that certainly expedites the process. I think there's a very high level of familiarity within the Energy Division, which is the kind of the office of the Public Utilities Commission that takes on this certification exercise. So they've seen this before. They're familiar with the information that's included in the plan and the organization of the plan itself. And to the extent that we kind of stick to that, it'll really help facilitate that process.
Okay. John, you had a question?
Through the chair, excuse me, Mr. Harpootlian, could I just ask that you lift your microphone up slightly? I'm familiar with these mics, and I think you'll get a better resonance that way.
Okay, thank you.
Is his microphone on? I don't see a light.
Yeah, can you hear me
don't
now?
worry, but
Sorry
yours
about
on.
that.
Did you want to ask a question?
Okay. I'd like to go back to slide number 9, and where you talk about the retail service options. And I assume it's going to be more than 2, but my question is something different. Is that, will the default be settable by each individual city, or is this group going to set a default for all 12 agencies?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think I'm hoping Melody, maybe you'll weigh in a little bit here too. The way that this has occurred with other operating CCA programs throughout the state is that there has been a single default service offering that's been made available throughout the entire service territory. That doesn't have to be the case, though. And then with regard to the 2 options that you mentioned and whether or not there'll be more, I think I just want to make sure there's an understanding that, we will have different tariffs available for differently situated customers, meaning residential customers, small, medium, large, commercial, industrial, and the like. But in terms of the different resource mixes that will be available to those different customers, I think the intent is to commence service with 2 of those, unless, of course, your board decides to do something different.
Is that correct, Melanie?
It is correct. We have envisioned it so far being a single program available to all customers. Again, reminded that there are different rate categories. We have had the inquiry about whether it could be different for different jurisdictions, and mechanically it's possible. It would be a thoughtful consideration by the board because it will increase administrative complexity. You can imagine if we have even just 2 different program options for different jurisdictions, you then have 2 entirely different sets of rates and associated categories. It also will change how we communicate with customers, that we have different messages for different communities about what the program is. So our current path has been to pursue a single program option for all communities, but if directed by the board, we can bring it back for a richer conversation when we talk about the implementation plan.
And if we get pushback from our residents, then we bring it back here and try to discuss it? Is that what the goal is?
We think the most encouraging thing is that for residents who want that kind of flexibility because they want to be greener, and that's been the general inspiration we've heard, they can go for the 100% voluntary option for a slight price premium to have 100% renewable energy for their home. So for their individual account, they can make a decision to have a different program option.
Thank you.
Okay. Rod?
Thank you, John. So I've been in touch with folks, supervisors in San Mateo working on Peninsula Clean Energy. My understanding is their timeline to start is similar to ours, and their launch date is earlier than ours. And I'm interested in what you know. I believe you may be consulting for them as well. Mm-hmm. Can you comment on their milestones on slide 14, what those look like in comparison to ours? And to Howard's question, what would be the opportunities if we wanted to do some things in parallel? What could we do to perhaps accelerate the schedule? What are the risks there? I recognize that there also may be risks in waiting, that is legislative and regulatory risks. So if you could address that, that would be helpful.
Sure, yeah, and if I miss anything, please let me know. But basically, if we're kind of looking at your program compared to the Peninsula Clean Energy Program, kind of the key difference in terms of the commencement date for the initial phase of customer service is basically PCE, or Peninsula Clean Energy. They're targeting an October 2016 launch date. You all, of course, as the schedule here reflects, are targeting an April 2017 launch date. And I think, there are kind of pluses and minuses of going about it either way, really. But in terms of the schedule, one key piece of the puzzle is that Peninsula Clean Energy, for example, they already have submitted their implementation plan, so that clock has already started ticking, that 90-day clock.
When did they do that?
They did that, I believe it was April 4th, so not long ago.
So 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, so that 90-day clock is already ticking. They've already released their energy services RFP. In fact, the due date for responses it's this Friday. It was originally actually this Friday. They pushed it back to the following Wednesday, the 20th of April. And then they're going to begin the supplier selection process really immediately thereafter. I would say that all in all, their timeline might be slightly more compressed than yours. So, they're kind of taking these things up as quickly as they prudently can. And, I think your schedule may allow a little bit more time along the way to...
6 months more, to be exact.
Yeah, to discuss these items.
So help me understand, if we're 1 or 2 weeks behind right now, how the end date could end up being 6 months.
Yeah, and I think it's a little...
Is there opportunity for us to, if seasonal timing is critical, is there an opportunity for us to be on an October launch as well?
Yeah, I don't think it's critical that you target an October launch at all. That was really kind of their preference. They wanted to launch in 2016. That was something that was made pretty clear early on in the process. And in terms of, if you're looking at, it's not really 2 weeks behind the schedule that you're operating on, because we haven't drafted the implementation plan. You haven't reviewed that information. We haven't talked about what that default product mix is here, which is key information that ultimately gets folded into the implementation plan. The RFP hasn't been drafted. So there's been a number of weeks of worth of work that's already been going on.
Their board meeting was about a month ago, their first
Yeah,
board
there was
meeting.
work that preceded
They're
that.
a month ahead of us.
Can I add something here? I'm John DeLessie, by the way, with Pacific Energy Advisors.
I'm just trying to understand, right?
Yeah.
It
Well,
feels like, okay, for those of us who have been waiting to make this happen, to Howard's point, this is feeling a little slow.
There's a time window towards the end of the year where you don't want to launch, and I think that's what's causing what looks like maybe, I would say you're 2 months behind Peninsula.
Okay.
based on our schedule here. So you'd say, okay, well, if they're going in October, we could go in December. Not a good idea to launch in December, and there are a few different reasons for that, but one of the biggest reasons is PG&E changes its rates on January 1st. So, do you really want to launch a program not knowing what that competing rate is going to be just days later, right, when you enroll your customer? So that, what we advise is and we advise this to Peninsula Clean Energy as well, if you're going to launch this year, you really ought to stay away from the end of the year. October is what we would say would be the latest that you want to do it. So that puts you into January, or, it puts you into 2017. And what is nice about the April date, you could argue, okay, you could do it a month or so earlier, but it's really nice to have that PG&E benchmark in hand in January. You can really fine-tune your rates to make sure it's competitive in the way you want it to line up relative to PG&E's rates, and then have time to notice your customers with those rates in hand and then enroll them. And so that's where the April date comes in. There's also a rate issue here that, assuming that SVCEA has a similar rate structure as PG&E, they are seasonal, and so the summer rates, which are higher and produce the most revenue for the agency, begin in May. So by enrolling customers around that time, you maximize those early cash flows. So there's that aspect to the timing as well.
I mean, with a 25-month phased deployment, I mean, if we started, is it possible to start in February or March, or is that also off the table if we want to adjust to PG&E's rates? I'm just trying to understand the parameters.
John, can you also address whether the 25-month deployment for all of our customers is the only option for us?
Right. We'll start with that one. So the 25-month was the assumption that was embedded in the technical study, but you are not constrained by that phase-in program. I mean, part of the discussion in the next couple of months will be what phase-in plan do you actually want to adopt. So that's I think the first point. Could you move phase one ahead of April? Yeah, I think you could. I think you could push it by a month or two, but is that are there significant enough benefits to doing that to outweigh, I think, the real advantage of launching in April? It just fits in very nicely with the rate-setting cycle to target that date. But yeah, you could go a little bit earlier than that. But like I said earlier, I would not recommend trying to hit 2016. I think if we really,
we're too late. We can't get to October, and therefore we can't get to 2016.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Rob?
Thank you, Chair McAllister. My question's I thought of on page 12 about procurement, and I realize maybe it's a little bit early to be thinking about this, and you probably procurement you want to go after big pieces, but your bullet about the is not intendeds and you don't want to get involved in these programs made me ask this question. One thing that I thought this program could do eventually, probably not in the beginning, is incentivize more solar in residential or commercial by actually buying power, not just letting meters roll back and forward, but actually go beyond. Right now there's no incentive for somebody to put something on their roof larger than the power they can use. Seems to me we can break that mold because we're not PG&E, and that would help the whole purpose of this more. So is that something we would not want to do, or?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think maybe the type of program that you're referring to would be characterized as a feed-in tariff, which would be for projects that are really intended to be primarily net or exporters of power, and projects with which the SVCEA could contract to kind of supplement its overall power supply portfolio. And that's certainly a type of program that's been implemented both very effectively by MCE and Sonoma Clean Power as well. They have tariffs that are available to address those sorts of relationships between those sorts of projects. The prices that are paid, which are typically they're above market, they reflect incentives that are intended to attract developers to the region. and also acknowledge the kind of above average development costs within those particular areas as well. So that's definitely the type of program that you could put in place at the time of launch or shortly thereafter. Really, it's based on your preference. And then, of course, the size of that program, meaning what would the participatory cap be for the level of projects or overall capacity of those projects that could participate. That's something that you could take up as well based on the financial impacts of those sorts of programs, because again, the prices tend to be above market in order to support those smaller scale local renewable projects that typically don't benefit from these same economies of scale that the larger utility scale projects would, that are located in optimal areas. So yeah, I think that's something that's definitely down the road, but it's separate and apart from the energy services RFP.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand that.
Director Simidian?
Thank you. Ms. Tovar, I wonder if we could go back to the slide where there was reference to the number of rate offerings.
Sorry.
And forgive me, I stepped out, but I could hear over the speaker system. There was a very brief discussion that I wanted to circle back to about the number of offerings. And could you describe that one more time in terms of a single offering versus dual offerings? It wasn't clear to me if there was a single offering that had two choices, or because ordinarily when you think of a single offering, you don't think of two choices, you think of a single offering. So I just want to make sure I have that understood.
Thank you. So we envision that there would be a single program offering that would serve as the default program for all customers that enrolled. In addition to that single default program offering, there would be a voluntary option to opt up to 100% renewable energy for a price premium.
And when I heard you suggest that we didn't want to get too complicated with too many options because that posed some administrative challenges, that does still anticipate, though, that there would be those, quote, two choices for a customer, yes?
That's correct. So they would always have the default and the opt-up option. The question on the floor was about whether we could have different default programs for different jurisdictions within the within the agency.
Thank you. And then, under changing topics, as to the relative speed with which we move forward, I understand the desire to go sooner rather than later, and the sense of enthusiasm and urgency that has gotten us to this point. But now that we're at this point, the decision's been made, I'm a little more inclined now to make sure we get it right from the start. So we've got new jurisdictions who have come to the party a little later than others. I'd just like to make sure we take our time, get it done right. From my standpoint, 2 or 3 months, understanding that there are some key moments that we ought to capitalize on, but putting that aside for a moment, 2 or 3 months one way or the other is less important to me than making sure we've got it right and aren't going to regret moving with haste. So, thank you.
Director Haney?
Yes, thank you. Can you refer back to page 12 where you talked about resource adequacy? In your comments, you stated that 115% supply demand had to be available to ensure reliability of the service to all the customers. Following up on Director Sink's comments and Peninsula Clean Energy's movement to get ahead of us, is there any risk to our project in that 115% demand availability?
No, not at all. That regulatory requirement, basically you can think of it this way, because PG&E is already accounting for that when they procure these resource adequacy requirements. So when you leave, you can imagine, those underlying generators with which they've contracted, they don't go away. So there's still ample capacity that's available to you to enter into those contracts that'll be required in order to meet that reserve margin that I pointed out. So, there really aren't any major concerns in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would you like to continue? Or are you finished with your staff report?
So we do have additional information in the staff report. I did want to take us back to the timeline and just check in with the board. Earlier we had a conversation about the July board meeting, and I wanted to confirm that it's the general wish of the board that staff look at keeping July clear and not having a board meeting during that month, or not. So we can bring information back in May about whether there's any impact to the overall schedule. I don't envision that there's an impact to the overall schedule by us moving items out of July and into the adjacent months.
If you could bring that back, then
We can
John,
confirm with our council.
On that question, July is sort of pivotal because that's where we would give our blessing to the plan. And I wouldn't want to see the plan come back any later. She said move to adjacent months.
Well, that's what staff is going to evaluate to see what they can do.
Director Miller, thank you for that clarification, that input. We'll look at whether we can move it back to June, earlier to June, and/or whether moving it to August really has any impact to the overall timeline.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Director-
I think a July meeting should not be automatically excluded.
No, they weren't going to exclude, they were going to review availability of it.
Yeah, I'm just saying I wouldn't exclude a meeting in July just off the top of the,
No, I wasn't
okay.
going for that either. Okay. Thank you. So we go on to item 6.
Before we do, Mr.
Sir?
Fair enough that we don't exclude July. That being said, I can think of too many times when people spoke optimistically about getting together in July and March or April, and July came around, and it was just hard, frankly, to find people who were on the ground. So I want to temper that optimism with a little realism based out of the challenge of dragging people together in July. It's awfully tough. I know at some point, there is no good month. You can't do it here because of the holiday, and you can't do it there because of the summer, and you can't do it there because of the beginning of the year. At some point, you do have to say, let's just have the darn meeting. That being said, I've just watched too many Julys come and go where folks weren't in their seats because they had lives, and I want us to be optimistic but skeptical, I guess, on that. So,
Mr.
John.
Sinks.
So all I might ask is, because our schedules vary during the entire summer, perhaps, we might consider flexibility in the months of July and August, say, and poll the board for some alternate meeting dates. For example, if July or August, the set meeting doesn't work for a quorum.
Well, that's what they were going to propose for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We will go on to item 6.
Chair, we're going to continue the presentation if that's okay.
Please.
Thank you so much. So we now want to turn over to Aaron Cook for information on our communication plan.
We're still on 5? This is not 6, okay.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and share a little bit of context about the way that we've reached out and connected with community members throughout this process. Is this okay? Can everyone hear me? Great. So we wanted to just give a quick context and background on the work that we've done to date, as well as our plan and vision in moving forward, which responds to the items that you're reviewing in terms of agreements moving forward. To date, our approach in working to engage and outreach to the larger public has been very much focused on getting to the point where we are today. So to this initiation of Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority. So doing a lot of outreach and connecting with communities so they understood what community choice energy was, where it's been successful, and understood the pathway that we were taking as an organization to bring it to our decision-making schedule that we have in front of us. So what we've been working on is doing a lot of outbound communication, so hosting things or working specifically with some of our existing consultants, again, that you have agreements in front of you to extend. So we've been lucky enough to work with MIG and Joint Venture Silicon Valley in engaging both the residential and business sector communities on things that are outbound in nature, which I just introduced. So we've been focusing on making sure that we had a brand and identity, so when we're connecting with community members, there's an understanding of who we are and where we come from, a certain level of professionalism. We've worked a lot on developing and honing in collateral. So things like creating our website, svcleanenergy.org, fact sheets, FAQs, all of the kind of media and material that we can use to further connect with people. It's really kind of the base of information, the platform that you want to build a community outreach and engagement plan upon. And then we have been working a little on kind of an entree into inbound communication. So working to get a pulse on the community in terms of where their interests lie and what their values are, in mostly around the formation of SVCEA. We've hosted about 15 community meetings. We've responded to other informational requests to participate in other community groups, and they're meeting them really where they're at, so coming to their own community meetings. And then we've done a good introduction to our business community by hosting business forums and webinars that being led by joint venture. To date, what we've been able to do is accomplish as part of this partnership is engage about 750 folks came to those community meetings. We've connected with about 50 businesses, and then we have about 500 web partners, so people that have signed up at svcleanenergy.org to learn more and participate in our e-blasts and other outbound communications that the group has launched. Noting, and my emphasis has very much been on that outbound communication approach. We want to really flip the table and make sure that there's a much stronger engagement mechanism to get a pulse on the community and understanding really where their interests lie to inform your upcoming decision making around some of the procurement information that you're going to need in order to understand and make make decisions moving forward. So knowing that our customer base is about 240,000 customers, seeing that we've only engaged 750, we know we've got our work cut out for us, and there's a lot more that we can be doing. That's going to really focus on things like doing community surveys. We envision doing that in the next month or so with your support to move forward on our professional services agreements. We'll certainly be working on actually launching kind of a new initiative on Monday, April 18th. We're hosting a community leaders workshop to connect with some of the key groups, actually that John mentioned in his, Chair McAllister introduced in his opening remarks, folks like the Carbon Free Mountain Views and others that are really interested in kind of harnessing the energy and getting more connected with and utilizing the resources that are available through SVCE. So we're hosting a community leaders workshop to connect with them and help them network around SVCE and the goals and the programs so that when SVCEA or the authority is making decisions, those community members can be involved and have a good understanding of what the touch points are with this board. We also envision doing things like focus groups and potentially with the board's approval, working on forming an advisory team to help us with understanding more effective strategies for communications and outreach, as well as giving kind of an initial vetting on some of the materials that would go out to the broader community. The main driver being that we are required by law to do 4 customer notices around the launch of this program, and our hope is that in doing that, we will be able to retain those customers and their interest as we move forward with procurement and the actual launch of the program. So there's a lot going on relative to this program, and there are a variety of community groups that are involved, as well as consultants. Just from a kind of simple hierarchical perspective, Cupertino is the one that has been leading community outreach and engagement from a program management or project management perspective and would continue to serve in that capacity. Then we would be continuing to work with MIG on kind of our residential outreach component. They would be the ones that would be doing things like the community surveying and polling and working on helping us develop a mechanism also to then work and partner with joint venture and engaging the business sector, who will also be doing surveying, of course. And then also working on the surveying and analytics, so kind of harvesting and working on cultivating really effective data to bring to you to help you understand what the interests of community members and businesses are, so that when you move forward with decision making, you have that information in your hand. And then basically the community leaders I mentioned earlier would be through this community leaders network. I'm working to connect with them, doing things like tabling at community events, working to make sure that resources are available to our community leaders groups, and then of course also to our cities themselves. We've been connecting with communications managers as well as PIOs in every agency to also make sure there's uniformity and consistency in the way that we're outreaching across our cities. This is one brand, one program. We want to make sure that that identity is consistent across our public agencies that are all involved in this. With that, I'd be glad to take any questions that you might have about the communications items that are on your agenda or the material that was presented.
Director Griffith?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, communication is going to be a key to this because not only do we have a legal requirement to perform a certain amount of communication before this starts up, but effective communication is what minimizes opt-out. Mm-hmm. And the success of the program is largely going to be driven on how few opt-outs we actually have. So when you say Cupertino is managing this, and you alluded to this, but I wanted to have it clear up front, each of our cities are the ones that are best at communicating with residents within their own cities. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be managing it, but for the large part, you're going to be leveraging the individual cities in the county in order to reach those individuals, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And that's been an interim stage item for us. Right now, we have we work to develop a resource list of all the CIOs, PIOs, communications managers at each and every one of your agencies, and have been reaching out and connecting with them person by person to make sure that they have template language for their website. They have template language they can put in newsletters, on social media, understanding what upcoming events they're participating in and or would like SVCE to participate in as well. Because we absolutely agree with you. We know that they know the most effective messages and the best assets to get information out to their network or their community.
And I know that communication may be very disparate, given that we're talking about at the high end Sunnyvale with 150,000 people, and at the low end Monte Sereno with 3,000 people. You know, Sunnyvale has its own print shop and its city hall. I think Monte Sereno probably goes to Los Gatos Kinko's in order to get its stuff done. Has there been any exploration of the individual cities' needs in terms of support, outside support, leveraging adjacent cities, or for the most part, are we just assuming whatever the city does now, it's going to be able to do it for this effort as well? If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think, we're trying to, so in some of those cities, honestly, we're working with city managers or assistant city managers who may manage communications materials for that agency. We're trying to just make it as simple as possible. So we have a community leaders toolkit that we're actually leveraging for both those community groups as well as our cities and public agencies overall, so that they have things, basically to connect with the resources that are available to them. And if they don't, then we have been doing things like providing flyers or fact sheets or things like that that they could connect to, links to websites, to other resources and materials that SVCE has prepared. The goal here is to not create additional burdens on behalf of communication staff in each of your agencies, but to utilize this as a mechanism and staff through Cupertino and through our selected consultants to make it really a one-stop shop and as easy as possible to get the word out about SVCE.
Yeah, and it seems like you're kind of engaging in sort of a delicate dance there, in that you want to take advantage of the resources available in each city because they're the ones that know their residents best. But we clearly benefit from regionalization and consolidation in doing something like this. So at what point? So we're talking about forming a new agency, and at some level, the new agency is going to have to pick up a lot of the ability for this on its own. Do we anticipate that not kicking in until closer to the startup in March? Are we going to just continue to leverage individual agencies' abilities, or at what point do we start trying to create our own capability?
So currently, and what's part of the Administrative Services Agreement is that Cupertino would continue to serve in that capacity while you're working to onboard new staff and grow the agency. So with the hope that your new interim CEO would come in by your May meeting, obviously working with that individual to understand what additional capacity is needed. If it needs to grow beyond that, I think we could certainly extend the Administrative Services Agreement or access additional consultant resources. Or staff up in that aspect a little bit more quickly.
And this is probably more of a discussion for when we get into interim versus permanent CEO and staffing levels. Okay, thank you.
Director Arini?
Thank you, Chair McAllister. My question is about the survey, I guess, or even maybe all the items in the blue here, or even the gray. Is the board going to get a chance to give any inputs on these, or review them? I'm thinking specifically things like surveys. I'm thinking about, okay, how can I get information to make good decisions up here as a board? And I'm thinking ahead, what kinds of decisions are we going to be making? And I think, for example, one, I haven't thought of all the things I might like to see in a survey, and I understand you can't make a survey by committee, but it'd be good to have some inputs anyway. But so one item I was thinking of was the question I asked of our consultants. It really came down to cost. Do we want to put a program in that encourages more solar on the roofs but costs us a little bit more? So, for example, I'd want to understand what's more important to people, promoting solar or making sure it costs less than PG&E or a lot less than PG&E. And I can think of some other things. But so my question is really about where will we be able to give inputs on this?
So the initial surveying that we would envision, I don't know what level of granularity it would go into, specifically around program design, because that would be a longer term discussion, I think, for the authority or the board. I think what we want to do in terms of understanding what the key elements are in the board's decision making, and really work to marry some of that surveying exercise around that. So knowing that you're going to be trying to understand what the energy mix is, and understand what rates and what people's what residents and businesses what their sensitivity is to some of those rates. We do have some kind of general questions that we've been using to date that have been guided and worked out with consultant development, and those are actually available online right now. And I would certainly ask, and we could send out a link to that after this board meeting to each of you to take a look at, and certainly provide feedback, and or just go through the surveying exercise yourself. It is very introductory. It's only about 6 questions right now, and it actually was worked on and developed in partnership with a community group. So we know that we're going to need to really amplify that in terms of making sure that it's statistically significant, and we'd be working with a surveying firm to do that. If there are specific touch points or questions that you'd like to ask or raise, I think we could maybe have a discussion about that at a future board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Director Gibbons?
Thank you. I would like to support Director Renee's comments on this. A lot of us smaller communities have been doing surveys lately, and the wording of the survey to get the information we want back is really important. And sometimes we're not as sophisticated as all of you who have been working, and certainly our residents aren't. So the survey language is really important to us. And I would also like to continue the conversation by Director Griffith on how to outreach. And again, I offer a caution. There's an assumption, which certainly for my community of Campbell is not a good one, which is that we know how to reach out to our community. We do not have a good, viable system of reaching out to our community. And that's a concern to me that I don't want to see us, I hope, take a carte blanche look, because certainly Mountain View and Cupertino and Sunnyvale have a larger, more sophisticated, more engaged community in some of these issues than certainly the smaller communities. I went to all of our presentations, and I think we had, other than staff, I think we might have had 8 community members engaged, and that's not for me wanting and pushing as hard as I could to get the word out. So I'm a little nervous about that. I would also like to just highlight that the top 100 are great to go at first, but remember, they're concentrated in certain areas, and I think it's very important to make sure that the information that comes back to the board is balanced by communities as well as big users. You've got to have the complete perspective so we can make our decisions in a balanced way. So I love what you're saying. I'm just a little nervous that it's a little bit of the gorilla in the room. Thank you.
Okay. Director Miller?
Oh, mine was a question about counter PR or counter advertising. Do we expect PG&E to launch a campaign to persuade people to opt out?
Well, there is a code of conduct associated with PG&E's activities such that they are not allowed to use ratepayer funds to do any such marketing, and they have to go through a step of convening a special committee should they decide to want to do that kind of work and resource it a different way. And we've seen no signal that PG&E is moving on that path. So we don't expect to see that. Certainly it's something that we're always mindful that there could be some type of opposition messaging that becomes more prevalent in our communities, and we would respond at that time.
Another reason to be early.
Director Sinks?
Hear, hear. I have more of a comment than a question. I've had an opportunity to speak to 4 high school classes in my city and a couple of colleges, San Jose State, a couple of classes there, and on this topic. And what I will say is the video that we produced all these many months ago in the fall was the single most effective communication tool. And it's that tool that we can push out through social media. So I'm wondering if our budget has provision to maybe refresh that video. I mean, most of the content is fine, but it'll probably need a refresh or two. as we move through this process toward launching, and I wonder if that's part of the communication plan.
Yes, we know exactly what slides we need to adjust, and that is one of our first action items.
So parts of the video, right? This turns into, okay, because, I mean, if those of you who haven't seen it, I suspect everybody has, but to me, that is a very concise and fun way to go figure out what this is about, because otherwise it gets a little wonky, right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Bruins.
Yeah, I just want to make one other comment. In terms of the community outreach, as we try to, again, it depends on what we're going at. If we're trying to get survey, if we're trying to get information in, trying to test, quote, our market for this with our residents and such. I agree with some of the comments that have been made in terms of trying to make sure we're getting a reasonable, balance across all the jurisdictions. But the other thing is I think we also need to be realistic about it in terms of, I think all of our communities, I don't think we're unique in Los Altos, but when you're doing things like this, you end up with affinity groups, okay? Everybody who's green in our community kind of comes out for this. Then there's everybody else who kind of just, kind of goes with the flow or, is not paying attention. So you end up paying attention to what's important to you. And when we looked at, our turnout, we had a great turnout there at Lacey. But when I look around the room and I say, what's the percentage of new people not usually in this affinity group, maybe 10%. Otherwise, it's kind of your, usual set of suspects for this particular topic area of interest. So I think that's a challenge, and I think we're going to have to figure out how to conquer that. But I'm hoping that if we're using information so that the board can be making some decisions, it's going to be challenging.
I will just note that the survey that we envision would be a random sample. So I don't know if any of you have worked with Godby research firm. So our city uses them, and they, again, produce statistically significant surveys that we rely on very much in our community, and that is the subconsultant that we would envision hiring for this, and they would be sampling across all of your communities. I would also just flag that the noticing that we suggested also would be certainly going to all residents and businesses, so any customer in the territory. Our goal is, of course, this outreach it needs to precede that. We don't want the first communications, the first point of contact with residents to be that opt-out notice, or that customer enrollment notice.
Okay, seeing no further questions, go resourcing and staffing.
Thank you. So as we turn the corner to going to the actual agenda item actions, we wanted to touch on the resources and staffing plan. So as we've said a number of times, the JPA in its early months does not have its own staffing, and so we are recommending that member agency staffing and consultant support be used until the authority builds its own operational capacity through hiring its own staff. Given the technical nature and the specialized nature of many aspects of this kind of program, we envision that there will always be some measure of consultant support, but that early on it will be more heavily relied upon. And so we've just reminded you of the overall timeline and then want to overlay that with the timing for staffing steps. And so we envision building the personnel tools. We need a personnel policy. We need to identify appropriate benefits, provide a staffing plan, et cetera. And so we envision doing that in the August to September window, leaving us ready to act and actually go out and recruit for staff for the authority, such that we are bringing staff representatives on in the November to January window just before active launch. So that structure for how we're going to provide interim support to the JPA is shown here. And so we identified a number of roles to fulfill operational needs and identified how we would propose to fulfill each of those roles. We resourced the 4 sponsoring agencies as the member agencies who may be able to contribute staff, and all 4 have come forward with different measures of support for the JPA, such that we have a pretty complete picture of resource support until the JPA is prepared to hire its own staff. As we go through the items, some of them are proposed to go on for both Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the program, but most of our proposed actions this evening really relate to resources around Phase 2. So essentially the window between now and about the end of the calendar year or the end of November. A couple of them do extend beyond that. For leadership, we propose that you would hire an interim CEO via contract, again, until you have your own personnel system and are ready to hire a permanent CEO. We have agenda item number 10 related to that. For operations and planning, we propose that Sunnyvale would lead that, similar to what we have done through the partnership phase, the early partnership phase, that I would be available to the authority as operations manager and supporting and partnering with the CEO to advance the overall organization objectives. And then we would also resource Lean Energy, Sean Marshall, who had helped us in our early months as well, to continue to help us strategize on best approaches for operational advancement. For community engagement, you just heard from Aaron, and we've talked a bit about the MIG and joint venture agreements that we propose to scaffold our communications program. For legal services, this evening we are supported and have been heavily for several months through Greg Stepanisic with Richards, Watson, and Gershon. As we note in the staff report, Greg has experience from the Marin program as well as the rooted experience here with helping us to develop our partnership agreement that brought us all here. We do note, however, that the services provided by this firm are not the full panoply of services we will need for legal counsel as we launch. So energy contracting is its own specialized thing, and we will want specialized legal support in order to guide that effort. And so we do propose to seek special legal assistance for that and to bring a recommendation to the board about a contract related to that. For technical services, we propose the Pacific Energy Advisors be contracted, it's item number 12 on our agenda this evening, to continue to support us with program development and launch. There are various complex technical elements, and they have served all of the active community choice energy programs here in California, as well as helping us during our evaluation phase. They are probably the one resource here this evening where we do propose that we go ahead and establish their contract for both program development, phase 2, as well as program launch, phase 3. In finance and accounting, the JPA agreement says that we will have a treasurer, and of course we need someone to manage our money. We propose that the City of Sunnyvale will provide that service as part of item 7, our admin services agreement with the authority, and we later will talk about a specific appointment of the treasurer role within that. Mountain View is proposed to continue to support us with long-term finance planning. In addition to our current operating needs, we have a need for additional resources to bridge the point between when we secure energy contracts and when we actually have revenue from customers. And so securing those first contracts requires that we establish some bridge financing, and Mountain View has been helping to evaluate options on that. They will continue that work, and we'll be bringing an item forward to your next meeting about what options we have and pursuing an RFP with banking and lending institutions. Human Resources, Cupertino has helped us with that so far in doing the early steps to an interim CEO recruitment, and they are envisioned to continue that process as well as to provide support to your CEO with respect to administrative policies around human resources and establishing our own personnel system. We are hosted here by the county, and the county has to do some extra work as well to make sure that this room is ready for us and that the various operational elements are available to us, so they will continue to do that. Sunnyvale, under our contract, is proposed to provide clerk services, the actual meeting notes, et cetera. Lisa Natush is with Sunnyvale and is helping us this evening and will continue to do so. Regulatory advocacy, we work with Lean now, and we will continue to do so. There is also emerging quite quickly the idea of networking across active and emerging community choice programs so that we can strengthen our voice in the regulatory and legislative arenas. And so we will be pursuing both of those options, continuing to work with Lean, but also looking at how we network with existing and emerging community choice programs. Just a preview of your first item.
I think we have a question on item 5. Director Griffin.
Yes, thank you. I took note of the fact under finance and accounting, we have the situation where Sunnyvale is actually doing all of fiscal services and the treasurer work, but the planning's being done by Mountain View. That struck me as a little bit strange, and I understand Mountain View is just continuing. Granted, Sunnyvale does things a little bit differently than other cities. Did that factor into that in any way?
It did not. It was really seen as an extension of the way we were managing the roles during the partnership phase. And we did talk with both the finance directors for both agencies, and they were very comfortable that it was a complementary approach, that we would be handling the money for the early operational piece, and that Mountain View would be handling the strategic planning around how we advance the large financing components going forward.
Okay, so when you're talking financial planning, you're talking more about I don't want to say generating revenue, but income to be as compared to, for instance, the staff budgeting or something like that?
That's correct. So early staff budgeting and essentially how we expend and manage our current $2 million initial cost contributions will be managed by Sunnyvale. How we go forward with establishing a banking and lending arrangement associated with the $10 to $15 million we need to finance in some way in order to launch a program will be what Mountain View advises us on.
Okay. Does this mean that the authority will be doing 20-year budget planning like we do?
That is not bound, we have not bound the authority to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, item 6. Seeing no further questions, item 6.
Oh, thank you. So item 6 is our initial budget. It was a nice segue. We have shown here our initial budget of $2.05 million. That is the aggregate initial cost contributions from all of our member agencies. Those contributions are due to the authority by April 30th, so there is still time. In some cases, it was important for us to actually have this meeting in order to establish the right mechanisms for those contributions to come in. So we have established cost categories for how we envision the expenditures occurring, and those are shown here, with the most significant piece being staffing, both through contract and direct hires. And so this $2 million budget is intended to take us on paper all the way through June 30th of 2017, but in reality, we know that there will be additional funds needed, and that's that longer-term financing and funding that I've referenced Mountain View will be guiding us on. So the budget here is shown for practical reasons to go through June 30th, but recognize that there will be additional funding conversations around the additional amounts needed as we go forward, most likely right around the time we're adopting a budget for fiscal year 16-17. Other cost categories are the technical and legal services. Again, this category will cover the agreement recommendations that we make this evening. Other consultant services, which includes our community engagement, as well as future needs around data management contracting to support active launch of the program. And then miscellaneous administration in general, things as simple as rental for office space and IT support and computers and office supplies. So with that, we would recommend, if there are no questions, that you move forward with approving the initial budget for the authority.
Okay, any comments from the public? Questions? Okay, bring it back to board. Director Sinks?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So you see a need for a bridge loan or two in the amount of 10 to 15 million?
Yes, that's what our original technical study proposed.
And so we think that's still our best estimate of how much it's going to take to comfortably launch this and give us a cushion.
I think what we'll want to do is when we have the conversation around customer phasing and implementation planning, we'll want to marry that with what is that initial launch cost if you're going to launch at a certain pace.
So if we want to compress, that would take more capital to do so.
Or if
compress the schedule.
Or if we wanted to launch bigger. So if we wanted to launch more customers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Compress the ramp, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Director Griffith?
Are we ready for a motion?
I believe so.
Move approval of the proposed budget.
Second.
Second? Okay, I hear a first and a second. Director Haney, you had a question? Because we're going to just yay or nay it. Director Gibbons, you had a question?
No, I'm.
Okay, call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're back on a roll. Okay. Number 7, staff report.
Very briefly, the agreement with Sunnyvale describes the activities that I presented earlier with respect to our role. I'm here this evening because I am presenting the agreement. Our recommendation is that you consider approval of an agreement substantially in the form shown as an attachment 1 to the staff report with the City of Sunnyvale for administrative and fiscal services and reimbursement in amount not to exceed $225,000, and to authorize this evening that the board chair execute the agreement.
Any public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
So moved.
Second? Question? We have a question from Director Miller.
Yeah, just sort of a basic one of division of responsibility. So Sunnyvale is going to manage all the money. Sunnyvale is going to be the treasurer, and Sunnyvale is going to be the auditor.
Yes, it's pretty common with JPAs to combine both the treasurer and auditor positions. And so this really follows that practice. There still would be an outside audit done, though, by a CPA firm as your annual audit. So that will be really the outside verification that the books are in order and proper accounting is taking place.
This is really just an initial condition anyway, so I'm assuming once we get it up and running, we could probably separate those duties if this body so felt.
You could have two functions there separate, or you could combine them both. That's your choice as you go down the road.
Okay, Director Griffith?
I would just like to commend staff on its recommendation. I think choosing Sunnyvale to do this was a wise choice for it to make.
Okay, we will keep our self-appreciation to Director Sinks? We have a motion?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Call for the question.
Can I just confirm the?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just confirm the seconder, please?
The second was over here?
Thank you.
I mean-
Thank you very much.
Morgan Hill. Okay, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Item 8.
All right, I'll make this one pretty quick here. Just run through the officers that you're going to have for the JPA board, and these are all required by the JPA agreement. The chair and vice chair, the regular ones, will be presented to you, or you'll be acting upon that at the next meeting in May. With respect to the secretary role here is similar to the city or town clerk or county clerk, and so we'll come back with recommendation in June once the interim CEO is on board as to how that position would be filled. And the one item for action this evening, and this follows really from your last action on the Sunnyvale Administrative Services contract, would be the actual appointment of a person to fill the role of the treasurer auditor. And it's being proposed that the acting finance director for Sunnyvale be appointed for that role, Mr. Tim Kirby. So at this point in time, the recommendation would be for there be a motion to approve Mr. Kirby as the treasurer and auditor for the JPA.
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment?
Just a second.
Seeing none, bring it back. We have a first, second. Any questions? Okay.
Just a comment, if I could. I have long history with Mr. Kirby. I believe he has a long history working with utilities in the city of Sunnyvale. I think we would be hard pressed to find someone to be better served.
Okay, we have a motion, a second.
I'm sorry, one more time. Can I just confirm the maker? I got the seconder as Bruins, but the maker of the
The
motion?
maker was Rod Six.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, I know you guys are all anticipating, so we'll just, we make sure we have the first and the second, okay? Call for the question. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Item 9, staff?
Yes, following up to our conversation around community engagement, we recommend approval of an agreement substantially in the form shown in Attachment 1 with the City of Cupertino for community outreach and human resource services and reimbursement in an amount not to exceed $155,000, and to this evening authorize the board chair to execute the agreement.
Okay. Any comment? Oh, I said comment from the public. Seeing none, bring it back for a motion.
I have a question, John?
Okay, question, Mr. Director Miller?
Yeah, so I looked at these in totality, and some of the line items from item number 9 are also expressed in line items action items number 13 and number 14. So I'm kind of confused as to, we got 2 groups that are developing marketing material, 2 groups that are developing logos, 2 groups that are doing surveys, 2 groups that are doing print media materials. So can we differentiate what's happening between number 13 and number 9 on the second item and number 14 and number 9 on the third item?
So number 9 would be for Cupertino to serve as a project manager and to add additional capacity to support the consultants that are working more on, so for MIG, more on brand identity, which does not include deploying the brand. So Cupertino has been the one that's been developing FAQs and fact sheets, installing or adding logos to our website, adding additional content, cultivating that content, outreaching to broader community members, connecting with those community groups, with each of the organizations that we talked about earlier. So cities, developing the portfolio and suite of materials, refreshing it as needed, and then also supporting on a little bit more of a limited sense, joint venture Silicon Valley in their network. So knowing that they have a small team, as do we, but partnering with them to attend things like Chamber of Commerce meetings, meeting with businesses that are located in Cupertino and/or other venues, actually doing things like making phone calls, cultivating stakeholder lists. There's really a diversity of tasks that are required, and in many ways, it's much more cost-effective to use city staff and resources as opposed to resourcing that through the consultant. So really, this is honestly is presented as a cost savings opportunity and an opportunity also to aggregate and have a overarching project manager to make sure that we're doing effective and consistent messaging across all these audiences.
So I get what you've said, but I can't ignore the words in the staff reports that say we have an outside agency that's going to develop the brand, the logo, and the taglines, and we have the city of Cupertino that's going to do the same work. Which one is it?
So sorry if I'm not articulating that clearly. So Cupertino, serving in project manager. So there's administrative aspects that go along with that as well. Things like overseeing contracting, overseeing invoicing, overseeing payment processing, managing consultant work. So making sure they're achieving their milestones, making sure that they're moving forward with the objectives that are laid out in each of their agreements. Then reviewing each of their works and deliverables that are submitted, evaluating those works, uploading those works when they're ready for public consumption, working to outreach with that information. So MIG is not envisioned to do any residential outreach really besides the community survey that we mentioned earlier. So Cupertino staff, and we actually also have a fellow that's working with us, would be doing things like attending community meetings, hosting community meetings, tabling at events. We're really here to lend added capacity to outreach to make sure that it is effective and we can connect with each of your communities because we don't envision that our consultants will necessarily have the capacity to do that, specifically with residents.
I got that, but tell me about item number 2.
Yeah. Director Miller, if I could add, I think I'm clear on what you're referencing in item 2, where we do begin the description of the task for the scope for Cupertino by saying messaging, collateral, and brand development. And so a more refined way of thinking would be to say that Cupertino is managing that effort, but that the on-the-ground work of creating the collateral and the brand is going to be the work of MIG. But even when you have a PR firm on the outside, that work requires that you have someone representing the authority, collaborating to create responsive product, and that would be the responsibility of Cupertino.
So then my second question would be, if it's just managing, we're managing $40-something thousand worth of effort with $50,000 of staff resources. So again, I would really like to understand how we're spending the money on that line item vis-a-vis the work that has to be done.
Sure, and I think some good examples are, Aaron started to touch on them, but I'll give a couple of concrete ones that we've experienced already. So whereas MIG might create the template for a fact sheet, we find that we have needs that evolve quite quickly with customers and stakeholders saying, what about this question and what about this question? And it's more expensive for us to aggregate that information, ship it off to another consultant, and then have them give it back to us versus being able to resource one of our team members to do that work quickly. And so we've been working as a team when these needs arise and addressing them more quickly. Another one would be the website. MIG creates the website and the framework, but the updates to that website within the technical capability of our own internal team, in this case Cupertino, does all the updating. And so we're not shipping that work outside.
Okay, I get it. Cupertino has a management oversight role, but they are also going to have a fingers in the pie role too to make sure everything works.
What
I
we think of as deployment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm satisfied.
Director Sinks.
If you go by Cupertino City Hall at 8 or 9 p.m., you'll often find Erin Cook and her team hard at work. And if you come in the first thing in the morning, you'll often find Erin Cook and her team. So I just had to say something about the enthusiasm with which this staff has undertaken the project. And I think what we learned in the months that preceded this meeting was MIG is very, very good at certain things, but actually they are expensive. They're good at what they do, they're expensive, but we can actually be much more cost efficient and have people that can better message and respond to questions. I mean, Erin and her team have become domain experts, if you will, in at least dealing with the public on these things. So I think they're looking very carefully at how to make sure we're spending money wisely.
Just to toot Mountain View's horn, Steve Attinger and Diane Rich are there on weekends, so I just want to leave them in the loop too. So we got you covered. Okay.
With that, I would move item number 9.
Okay, number 9.
Thank you, Howard. I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Secretary, did you get the motion there and the second?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Any questions or any comments from the public? Seeing none, any directors, are you still eager to vote, or any questions from that end? Okay, all, question on the floor, any motion? Let's take the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None, see, okay, unanimous. Okay, number 10. Make sure Steve and Dan, you're there on the weekend so people check it out.
Great.
Okay, number 10, staff report.
Yes, so presented before you in item 10 is a summary of the work that the City of Cupertino, in partnership with our legal attorney that's here tonight, have been working to deploy a recruitment for a contract interim CEO. The approach that we've taken is similar to those that have been deployed by our existing CCE, so Sonoma and Marin, to make sure that we're onboarding an effective leader to help add capacity and to support the board and its decision-making moving ahead. We've basically followed their process to a T. What we've worked on is submitting and sending out a request for qualifications for this interim CEO. That was done on February 10th. We got a series of responses from a very highly qualified applicant pool. And then we held initial interviews with those qualified CEO applicants that was narrowed through our team's evaluation. That was done through an expert panel that included representatives actually from Marin and Sonoma, as well as some of our executive leaders within our cities. And what we're presenting to you tonight is the opportunity to move forward with that next step, which we would suggest would be appointing an ad hoc committee. Sorry, I should read this in full, but our recommendation would be to appoint a Board of Directors ad hoc committee to conduct interim CEO interviews and recommend the selection of and a services contract with an interim chief executive officer for approval at the May Board of Directors meeting. Is that too early to read that?
No, and I just think we want to add that as the board considers convening an ad hoc, that we have already established the meeting date for conducting those interviews as May 11th. And so is that right?
No, Tuesday,
Oh, sorry.
April 26th.
Thank you.
From 1 to 5 p.m. Just wanted to prepare that in advance, noting that some of you may have conflicts.
Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, bring it back for a motion.
So in this case, we would need the motion to be inclusive of the representatives that will serve on the ad hoc committee. And so the board may consider letting individual board members express an interest and then making a motion to appoint what we recommend to be 3 to 4, but could be up to 6 members to an ad hoc committee.
Do you have a more specific time on the 26th?
It would be from 1 to 5 p.m.
1 to 5, okay.
Okay.
I'd volunteer.
Okay, we have one.
I volunteer also.
Okay, we have Rob,
I would volunteer also.
Howard, and I like to volunteer, so that's 4.
I'll volunteer as well.
Okay, 5. Do we need more? Saying once? 5 or 4?
So moved?
Okay, we have 5. Secretary have the 5?
Yes, Sinks, Miller, Rennie, McAllister, and Harney.
Okay. Second? Or do we have a motion first? You did? Okay. Second? Okay. Discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Moving on. Thank you. Number 11.
Thank you. This evening, I present for approval the agreement with Richards, Watson, and Gershon for legal services in amount not to exceed $80,000. This is the agreement that will provide for Greg Stepanisic to support the board with general counsel legal advice through its early months. I want to note that Greg has already been doing work for us since the beginning of the month, and so we do request that this agreement be retroactive to April 1st, and request that the board authorize the chair to execute the agreement this evening.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Okay. To the board, any?
So move.
Most of the move?
I have a question.
Okay. Director Bruins?
Yeah. In terms of, in the agreement, it talks about the termination on 5.0, and it says the authority shall have the right at any time in terms of termination. It's not clear who the authority is in this case. Are we talking about the board? Are we talking about the CEO? And so I was assuming it's the board, but could we make sure you're pretty explicit all the way through here, except on this one particular one. So if we could modify that to be clear who the authority is?
The CEO.
That'd be the board, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, since the general counsel is hired by the board, it should be the board that do the termination.
Thank you. That's what I think.
So that could be clarified in the contract. We're happy to provide for that.
So did we have a motion already?
Yes, we do.
Can, friendly amendment to as modified?
Well, would you like to second it first before, we didn't have a second on the motion, so.
I will second it with that amendment.
Motion first, accept it.
I accept the friendly amendment.
Does the clerk have that information?
Got it, thank you.
Mr. Sinks, did you want to speak?
I'd just like to say that through this, through the last few months, I think Greg has done a great job with the agreement, getting us together, and his proficiency in this area is really quite special, and I think we are. It's great to have him serve us.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, seconded with a friendly amendment. We will still call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Number 12.
Yes, consistent with our staff presentation regarding the work plan, we propose that the board approve an agreement substantially in the form shown in attachment 1 with Pacific Energy Advisors for technical consultant services in an amount not to exceed $265,000. And we ask that they authorize the board chair to execute the agreement. We want to reiterate that PEA has been working with us through our early evaluation phase, and we believe we've benefited richly from not just their specific technical expertise, but also their rich networking to existing programs, and have helped us benchmark our own activities across other regions and other jurisdictions.
Okay, any public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a motion.
I so move.
Question?
Second.
Wait a minute. Oh, so moved, so okay. We have a motion, second. Any discussion? Okay. Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Number 13.
This evening, we present for your approval the agreement substantially in the form shown in attachment 1 with MIG Inc. for community engagement support services and reimbursement in an amount not to exceed $145,500, and ask that you authorize the board chair to execute the agreement. We also want to add that as part of the agreement, we have been continuing to look at item 16 in the agreement, which relates to testing design and ownership of deliverables and the deliverables themselves. We do envision that we want some additional time to work directly with the consultant to refine those provisions, and that we will do that with your board direction.
Okay. Any public comments? Not saying none, bring it back to the board for a motion.
Have a question?
Question?
So in terms of understanding the relationship, and maybe who's directing the consultant in this particular case, again, reading through this, the relationship between, in this case, Cupertino as the project manager on this piece versus the CEO. So who's kind of, who's directing the
So
actual?
operationally, the City of Cupertino staff would be providing lead direction to the consultant at the direction of the CEO. And so the CEO is ultimately the party responsible or representing the agency with respect to the contract. But with respect to day-to-day work, Cupertino will be providing direction to the consultant.
So is the consultant, is all direction then going through from the CEO through Cupertino, so that it's not two different individuals managing the consultant?
Yes. That's the way that we would envision that relationship working.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear in terms of, who's giving the direction. Thank you.
Director Sinks?
I realize that between this and the other contract we approved, there's a lot of money here for communication and outreach. But as Director Griffith noted, a big part of what we are doing here is educating the public and bringing them along. And as many have noted, despite all of our community outreach meetings, we've reached the eager and not the general public, and we need to reach the general public. So I know this is a lot of money, but I will be supporting it.
Director Miller?
Just a question. You made comment on item 16, which was design and testing. What additional work are you doing in that area? Is it just about getting the vendor to provide a quality acceptance plan, or what other guidance did you actually need from us?
Sure. So when we think about design testing and how we manage ownership of deliverables, the deliverables for a communications plan can be diverse. The website, something quite ethereal, and a brochure or a fact sheet template. And so we want to make sure that we've just got the wording right, that we're getting what we expect in terms of product that is transferable readily to the authority at minimal expense, should we decide at some point to untether from the consultant.
So you just want approval from us tonight to do what's right under item 16?
That's correct. Thank you.
I understand that. I could make a motion if you wanted it.
We have another, Director Haney had a question.
Yes, I have a question related to this 145,000, and I didn't get an opportunity to ask a question earlier when you made your presentation, Ms. Banks, so forgive me. But in regards to the website, the community outreach, I've noticed that on the website, it's only in English. And as you know, in Gilroy, 48% of our population is Hispanic. And I'd like to know if this is inclusive of the Hispanic population and Spanish language, or if it's all just for English.
You probably want to ditto that for Mandarin.
There actually is a small portion of the scope for MIG to consider other language development. I don't know that that would extend to web materials, just because of the extensive nature of the materials that are housed or warehoused there. But for things like fact sheets or FAQs, and certainly the postcard that would be developed for customer noticing.
So this funding is only adequate for English. Would that be a fair
So
assessment?
I did mention that I believe a portion of some of the updates to the FAQ or fact sheet in MIG's scope does envision development in additional languages.
Thank you.
Director Gibbons?
I would support that discussion. I think that language is a consideration, and staff may have to come back to the board with a clarification of what additional languages, because my premise, let me follow what you're saying, my premise is, what is the main communication tool going to be? Is the main tool or a main tool going to be the web page? And if it is, then we need the language support.
Director Bruins?
Well, you know, now that you raised the language issue, if we go back to, we were talking about using Brian Godby for the survey and such, I would raise the language issue there. If we're trying to get across our demographics, it's going to be important that that also be available to the multi-languages.
Mr. Miller, you have a motion?
Yeah, I'd move that we accept the staff recommendation for item 16, also giving staff for item 13, also giving the staff flexibility on item 16, testing and acceptance. And I further would ask that the staff bring back a plan at the appropriate time for the appropriate areas to deal with all of our communication concerns across various languages.
Okay, do I see a second? Hear a second?
Second.
Second? Okay. Secretary had the motion in a second.
I do, thank you.
Any discussion? Okay, call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passed unanimously. Number 14. Staff.
Great. So to advance the scope of work that's envisioned for additional commercial, industrial, small and mid-sized businesses or medium-sized businesses, the team here today would recommend the opportunity to continue and then expand upon our partnership with Joint Venture Silicon Valley, who is well-positioned and very poised to lead that level of outreach and engagement that's presented to you in your staff report and attached consultant services agreement. So our recommendation is to approve the agreement substantially in the same form in Attachment 1 with Joint Venture Silicon Valley for business community engagement and outreach services and reimbursement in an amount not to exceed $68,000, and authorize the board chair to execute the agreement.
Okay, any comment from the public? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Any motions or questions? Director Gibbons, did you? Okay, light went off.
I was just ready to make a motion if there were no questions.
Question or make a motion?
I would make the motion.
Second.
Motion? Okay, motion is made, seconded by Mr. Miller? Did you make the second or Mr.
Yeah, I made
Griffin?
the second. Somebody else can have it if they want it. Doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Motion's been made, been seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none. Okay, does staff and secretary have all the information they need for tonight?
Yes, thank you.
We do. We have a couple additional agenda items, but our action items are completed.
I'm sorry?
There's time on the agenda for board member announcements.
Okay, but I just wanted to make sure that you got your
We absolutely do.
directions.
Thank you.
Okay. Board member announcements? I have one. I just wanted to commemorate this evening because I wore a union, what's the, European Union tie. Sort of represents the union of all these great 12 cities, 11 cities, and of course, the county as he chokes on that. But it was a great collaboration. I think we moved well tonight, and so I thank you all. Other comments we'll start down with the...
John, I'm wondering if, when we adjourn the meeting, we might assemble up here for a photograph. I think this is an historic evening.
Okay, okay. Oh, before Director Gibbons, I have to personally thank Melody and Aaron for the dedication, the thoroughness of your work. I mean, even the, you should be watching out city managers for other cities, that we have our city manager here, so somebody could be knocking at your door, but you guys
No
did
poaching.
I didn't say anything.
So-
I just say I was just thanking them for their fantastic job that they did tonight. And
John, a
support.
question of logistics to the clerk. So we're going to give you our signed paperwork tonight, and for all the alternates that weren't with us tonight, I assume it's your job to dog them down and...
Yes, I'll be making arrangements with them to come in and take their oath of office.
Were there any alternates that came in late? Okay, so stick around. I think they can swear you in, correct?
Yes,
Any other
absolutely.
alternates that came in? Okay, we'll start with Director Gibbons, who had a comment.
I was just going to compliment you on stealing my thunder with complimenting the staff.
Oh, okay. That's the right of being the chair. Director Griffith.
Yes, thank you. I just thought that it was important on such an historic and auspicious night as tonight that somebody come out and actually say, "Go Warriors."
Oh, okay. You guys, anything on this end? Okay, seeing all the public notices, we are adjourned. Thank you all much.
Wait a minute, the agenda shows, John, the agenda shows public comments at the end, and so I think...
No, but we took them early.
I think you should give the opportunity for the
Okay.
public who decided to wait till the end to make
Okay.
public comments for
Thank
the
you.
agenda.
Okay, unadjourned, sit back now. Okay.
Thanks, and I hope the Warriors haven't started yet.
No, they haven't. Your
Okay,
time.
good. Hi, I'm Bruce Carney, a Mountain View resident and the president of Carbon Free Mountain View, which many of you know is an advocacy group that has supported the creation of this agency. There's a tremendous number of volunteers who've worked to try to make this night happen, and I'm certainly thrilled to be here to see what I think has been one of the most rapid public events of my life, and I've been involved in the public life for 20 years. The reason I'm standing here, though, is I want to make sure that you realize that there are many, many volunteers who would like to help move forward with whatever job you can think we would be good at. I know that there's a meeting next week in Cupertino to train volunteers for outreach, and perhaps one other way that volunteers could be useful is to do the Spanish, Mandarin, Vietnamese translation of web material. I'm not trying to say that amateurs could do an adequate job. I'm trying to say that committed volunteers who are fluent in multiple languages could do a really good job at a volunteer's wage rate and help the authority save their money for things that volunteers cannot do. And I am not sufficiently bilingual myself to be one of those people, but I'm sure there are many, many folk who, if asked, could step forward and do a great job. So thank you so much, and go Warriors.
Oh, thank you for your Anybody else with public comment? Okay, we have enough. We need you to fill out a card to give it to our secretary so they can put it in their record. So she has the forms. Thank you, sir.
I'm Ron Swenson, and I just am very grateful to hear public officials at the local level bringing climate change to our attention. Mr. Smithian especially at the beginning. And I've waited a long time for this to happen. And several of you on this group know that we have a team of students at San Jose State who are working to take this not only to the home and to the business, but also to the streets. We're developing a transportation system based 100% on solar. and I welcome the opportunity to introduce you to some of our students when the time is right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to that. Sir, please make sure you fill out a comment card. Did anybody else would like to make a last public comment? Well, thank you all for staying here for the inaugural event. We moved along, we covered a lot, we appreciate it, and we look forward to you helping us out in the future. Thank you to our board, and I believe somebody wanted to get a group photo here for our first one, so we come along here. Who's our staff photographer? Please step forward.
Sadly, it's just me.
Oh, no.
I would have had more to say.
We're glad to share, but if anyone else would like a photo, I will share it.